Today we're going to talk about how to make a pedigree chart. The goal of a pedigree chart is to look at the genetic history of a family over several generations. Here you can see we've got one generation with mom and dad and their kids, 2 girls and 2 boys. They're looking at a trait for rolling your tongue. When we look at a pedigree chart, we are tracking inheritance of one particular trait, and it can either be for a trait like brown hair or eye color, or it might be for a disease. Now, a pedigree chart can look like a lot of different things. A pedigree chart could be something simple like this, or a pedigree chart could be a little bit more complicated. Or it could look like this. Yikes. We won't get to a pedigree chart that's this complicated for a couple of days. But what do those circles and those squares actually mean? Well, let's break it down by looking at one that's a little bit more simple. When we're talking about how to make a pedigree chart, those squares represent males. And the circles you see represent female. The whole point of a pedigree chart is to say if someone has a trait or not. If for the trait we're talking about, someone is affected, we color in their box. If the female has a trait, then we would color in the circle. If someone is not affected for a trait, or if they're a carrier but they don't actually express the trait, then we leave their box or square empty. To show when 2 people are married or are mating, we take our male and our female and we link them with a horizontal line. Now that shows that those 2 people are having a kid together. If they are, we draw a vertical line and then we can link it to their offspring. So maybe this couple had 3 girls. And if we wanted to show that one of their girls had whatever trait it was we were studying, we'd go ahead and color in that circle. Now you have to remember that this trait, this person who's colored in, they may have a dominant trait or they may have a recessive trait. You are going to have to look at the whole pedigree to determine what their actual genotype is. Remember those invisible genes. Let's go ahead and start with your first example. In this pedigree, the parents have 4 offspring. They have 2 males and they have 2 female. The mother and one of the sons show the trait, but no one else does. This pedigree only shows phenotype. It does not show genotype or whether a trait is dominant or recessive. You will have to determine whether the trait is dominant or recessive. Now let's get specific. This pedigree actually shows who is allergic to strawberries and who is not. If you are allergic, then you have little s's. If you are not allergic, then you could be heterozygous or you could be homozygous. So let's try and label this pedigree with genotypes and see if you can figure out who actually has the trait and who doesn't. We're going to try and put their genotypes on there. Go ahead and pause the video right now and see if you can label it. Okay, let's see how you did. Well, it's usually easiest to start with someone who's affected, like this person. These are little s's in case you can't tell, but we know mom is affected because her circle is colored in. Remember, we color them in when they're affected. We also know the son over here is affected, so his genotype is also homozygous. Now, when we're trying to figure out the remaining 3, we know that mom can only give little s's because that's all she has. So everybody has to have at least 1 little s. But dad up here does not have the trait. He's not affected, which means he has to have at least 1 big S. But because the son has the trait, then dad must also have a little s. Otherwise, how could his son have gotten 2 of them? So if we take mom and dad and we think about what the genotype of their offspring are, we know mom gave everybody a little s. And we know dad gave most of his kids a big S, because those 3 are not effective, but he gave his one son over here a little s, which is why that person is also allergic to strawberries. Remember, if that was confusing, watch the video, rewind just this part again until it makes sense. Okay, let's go on to the next example. In Pedigree 1, we're looking at a family of parrots. One of the offspring shows the trait for blue feathers. Blue feathers are coated by the recessive little r. Now, we need to figure out what the genotypes are of the other offspring and of the parents. So can you answer the first question? Do you think blue feathers are dominant or recessive? Hopefully you remember that little r's mean they are recessive. So what's the genotype of both our parents? And what are the genotypes of the other offspring? Pause the video now and try and answer it. So let's start with the parents. We know that if our male son over here has the trait, he got his 2 alleles from mom and dad. That means dad has to have one little r and mom also has to have a little r. But since neither mom or dad are affected, they must also have that big R, which in this problem codes for red feathers. Now, if none of the offspring have blue feathers, they must have each gotten at least one big R from mom or dad. But we don't actually know what their other genotype or what their other allele is. It could be a little r, or it could be another big R. We can't figure out what their genotypes are unless we took the offspring and they had babies. But we're not going to do that part right now. If that was too fast or was confusing, rewind this part and watch it one more time. Now let's take a look at a few rules of logic to help you understand the genetics behind the pedigree. Basically, follow these rules when you get stuck. So in our first example, if neither parent shows the trait, like we have in pedigree 1, the trait cannot be dominant. We have 2 options. The trait could be recessive, and one parent or both parents could be heterozygous carriers, which is exactly what we decided in this parrot pedigree, that all 3 of these offsprings were carriers. In our second rule, if only one parent shows the trait, then the trait could be dominant and the affected parent, this one, could be heterozygous while the unaffected parent is not a carrier. But you could also have the trait could be recessive. And if the trait is recessive, then this affected parent is actually going to be homozygous. So the unaffected parent would be heterozygous because they have to pass on their allele. Our third rule to follow looks at what happens if both parents show the trait. Now, if the trait is like the one in this example, then both parents could be heterozygous carriers, which means that some of the children could be unaffected. Remember, if you're heterozygous, you have one of each allele. We could also have the option where both parents are homozygous dominant. But if both parents were homozygous for the trait, then the trait could be recessive. This would mean that both parents would have to be homozygous and all of their children would have to be affected. If you look back up here, you can see not all of these children are affected, so we definitely don't have a homozygous trait. In pedigree 2, it shows 2 banana trees that were crossed to produce 4 F1 or first generation plants. Here we go, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Shaded individuals have green leaves, and the unaffected individuals have yellow leaves. If green leaves are dominant, which parent has green leaves and which has yellow leaves? And if yellow leaves are recessive, what is the genotype of the offspring? Pause and try this right now. Did you pause it? So let's start with what we know. If you're shaded, you have the gene. Since it's 4 green leaves, let's make a capital G. Show your genotype. Now we can figure out our parents. First of all, we know that dad can't be homozygous dominant because he has 2 sons that don't get his capital G. So dad must be heterozygous, which means that dad can pass on either a big G or a little g. So let's show how he passes on his genotypes. I'm going to do all of dad's genotypes in blue. So we know dad gave these guys their capital G allele for green leaves, but dad must have also given these guys a lowercase one. Now let's talk about mom. So mom does not show the trait. And since it's dominant, we know that she's actually homozygous recessive. Otherwise, she would also have green leaves. So she must have passed on a little g to all 4 offspring. That means we've got 2 homozygous recessive, and we've got 2 heterozygous individuals. Now it's your turn. Try the practice problems on your own, answer the summary questions, and write one question. Remember, if you got stuck, go back and watch the section that you didn't understand. Be prepared to discuss and share your practice problems tomorrow.